Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of our webinar series with CMPA. Tonight's topic, Bullying 101, how to prepare and protect your child from bullying. And I'd like to thank Sarah Kesty for joining us this evening. And it is National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month. And I think Sarah's going to enlighten us all to how we can go ahead and make our children safe and make them smarter as they go to school and other activities. So hopefully we'll pick up tips from Sarah and we'll go from there. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll take questions, everyone, as we go this evening. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them up, and we'll interrupt Sarah's presentation and get those questions in for you. So with that said, Sarah, take it away.
Okay, great. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to talk to our community. A lot of this content comes from a guide that I wrote and printed and presented in Sacramento last summer. So if the CMPA community would like a free copy of that guide, I can email it as a PDF to you. So towards the end, or actually on the last slide, you can grab my email address and do that. So without further ado, it is a whole lot of information, so please stop me via sending in a little question if you need any clarification, or if something you want further information about. I'm happy to do so, and I'm happy to talk privately through email if that's something that you're more comfortable with, because this can be kind of an intense subject. So before we start, I wanted to make sure that I kind of laid down some baseline understanding. I know that a lot of rhetoric around bullying centers around bully prevention and anti-bully. I've really seen that bullying behavior 9 times out of 10 is a manifestation of a child suffering. So someone who's choosing to bully is probably either bullied at home themselves or seeking some way to feel powerful in their life. So I certainly don't condone their actions, but what I've seen is that when we use the term bully, a child oftentimes kind of stuck between either disproving that they're not a bully or just sort of embracing that label. So instead, I like to describe it as a behavior. So a student who bullies or a student who's bullied at least gives them the opportunity to still be a student and define themselves as they would like. I may use the term bully in here just because it's quicker. It's really like a mouthful to speak with that people first language, but in terms of what I project in front of kids and what I project to other teachers, it's definitely people first. We don't want to set that label in place and have that be that child's identity. There's a whole bunch of data, and it's a very hot topic, but suspensions and expulsions, as far as what I've seen and what I've read in the research, really aren't a good way to address bullying. There's a lot of data behind like isolation, meaning that kids aren't going to work as hard to fit in because we've already kind of determined through those practices that they're not part of our group. So I'm not advocating for suspension and expulsions within our bully prevention, and I'll talk about that a little bit more.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you here for 1 second? I think
sure.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you in your audio, so I'm thinking maybe it'd be best if we would try the microphone maybe on the computer. That may work better.
Okay.
If you could mute your phone for a moment and try the mic. Let's just see if that works.
So mute the phone, or?
Yeah, mute the phone and try using the microphone on the computer.
Okay.
And everyone, while we do this, let's just take a moment here.
Is that going to be all right?
Yeah, that sounds a little better, I think. Let's try this for a moment and see where we go with that.
Okay, sorry. Technology, geez Louise. Okay, so we'll get back to that. So I don't know how much of the beginning we missed. If there were questions on the beginning slides, just email me and we'll catch you up since I was kind of inaudible. So back to this, I think we're really trying to internalize a lot of the suggestions today within kids. Ultimately, our job is to make them be effective adults. So this is a great opportunity for them to practice growing up and becoming the self-advocates that we'd like them to be. So part of that is not relying on us to fix problems for, but maybe fix problems with them. So a couple of facts, and please take this with, the understanding that we're going to address this. I'm sort of setting the stage and it might freak you out a little bit. So there's several statistics on here. I'm not going to read them to you, but what was interesting to me was that bullying really starts to increase, and where we really see it start becoming a little bit more commonplace is 6th grade and up. Before then, it's usually a different sort of conflict, and I'll help you delineate between those in just a second. But what's also interesting in these statistics is that cyberbullying is now included in the laws and policies that are in schools. And because of these laws and policies, schools have the mandate to investigate and address bullying when it happens. But keep in mind that not all conflicts are bullying, and it's part of the school's charge to uncover what is bullying and what is not, and then address it no matter what. But there's different ways to approach it if it is deemed as bullying. Because victims aren't the only ones who are negatively impacted by bullying, it's also interesting to address the witnesses that are part of that experience, and I'll give some tips on empowering your child if they witness bullying as well as if they experience it. I talked about the 6th through 8th grade, and it really makes sense as far as the peak right there, because there's a lot of pressure to fit in, but then also kind of distinguish yourself. In grades 6 through 8, there's a little bit of social change with hormones and all those types of things that really impact the very strange behavior we see in middle school. That happens to be my favorite grade level to teach, grade levels to teach, but it's also kind of the wackiest. So that's when we really need to keep our ears open. Unfortunately, that's also when kids start thinking that we don't know anything. So it's a real difficult tightrope to walk for kids, but that's really when we need to tune in. This was interesting to me. The most common areas of school, like the playground, the hallway, the bathroom, places that are used very commonly throughout the school are the most common areas to have bullying occur because there's less structure. So this is where, let's say a teacher sends a couple kids to the bathroom at a time. There's no one there to watch them. They're just supposed to use the bathroom and come back. Or walking in the hallways or things like that, or there's a ton of kids on the playground and only a few adults. So those are the opportunities that bullies will capitalize on for taking advantage of that lesser supervision. We'll talk about what relational bullying is, but girls are more likely to use it, so that's the social components. And low social skills and difficulty developing relationships are the highest indicators and predictors that students may be a target for bullying. So I'll give some tips on kind of bumping up the social skills, and even if it feels kind of fake for your child at first, we definitely just want to get them to develop maybe a school self and a home self. I know I struggle with this all the time because I don't want to be judged by my looks, but at the same time I recognize that that's what society judges me on. So I definitely hear you if you're saying, well, I don't want to teach my kids to be fake, or I don't want them to have scripted things to say, but part of that is just recognizing the culture that we function in and kind of playing the game so that we're all successful. So I talked a bit about this at the beginning when you probably couldn't hear me so well, but I like to say students who bully instead of bullies because it gives our children an opportunity to not take that on as their full-time identity. So describing bullying as a behavior is a little bit more freeing for our kids who maybe are experiencing the negative things that may entice someone to bully. It gives them the opportunity to change and not have that be become their identity. So the students who bully oftentimes have a pretty bleak experience in the present and then also as they grow up. So it's really interesting the criminal connections and that the bully behavior doesn't go away. It just changes and manifests differently as they're adults. So when you think of it from this perspective, it's pretty interesting to think almost as if the students who bully are kind of asking for help through that behavior. Maybe not consciously, but it's definitely something that schools and counselors can look into because it's not generally a common behavior for someone who's really thriving and really happy. You're just not going to see that. Students who are bullied continually have some pretty negative outcomes as far as research shows. So they may join a gang or a hate group, something like that, where they've experienced the isolation of bullying and they're seeking to never have that experience again, and so they seek it through unhealthy ways. There's a couple of psychosis issues related to bullying, lots of depression related to bullying, being a victim, and then, of course, missing school or having academic problems because you don't want to be at school. And like I said earlier, I know this sounds really negative. I will empower us and we'll feel good by the end, but I'm just setting the stage right now. So a couple things to look for if your child comes home and maybe isn't articulating that they've been bullied. These are a couple of signs that you may want to investigate further by maybe talking to other kids, reaching out to the teacher, reaching out to the principal or school counselor. And you can see a lot of these. Something that was interesting to me that I had never thought of was kind of taking the long way home or the long way to school. That would be an indicator that maybe they're avoiding something. Change in mood, sorry to say, if you have a 6th or 8th grader, that's going to happen anyway. But if it's a long-lasting change in mood, then that's something to investigate. And it could be something totally unrelated to bullying, but at least this is something to put off the checklist. A lot of these really overlap with depression too, so it's definitely something that I can't help you diagnose your child, but it's definitely something that you'd want to bring up to your pediatrician as well. What's interesting to me and what really has absolutely been a truth in my 12 years of working with students with and without special needs is that desire to miss recess. So I've actually had a couple of kids, one in particular who skipped his homework on purpose, and his teacher could not figure it out, you know, like what's going on? Why are you missing your homework? You're totally capable of doing this. The mom couldn't figure it out, like he would hide it, and finally we realized he knew that that was his ticket to miss recess, and he was experiencing bullying at recess. So he figured out a way to not experience it, which kudos to him, but also I'm really glad that we kind of unlocked that experience for him so that we could help him out. And things worked out just fine, and he started doing his homework. So I've talked a lot about, you know, bullying this, bullying that, but here's the thing, not everybody understands truly what bullying is. So I'm going to take a minute to explain a couple of things. So if you look in the top left, teasing. You can tell if something is teasing because it's fun for everyone and it doesn't hurt anyone. So In this case, the recommendation would be to kind of listen, like listen for potty words or listen to see if it's crossing the line. But if it looks like everybody's having an okay time, you don't really need to intervene. Conflict on the upper right is not fun for everybody. Everybody's angry. There's a solution possible, and the people who are involved are on the same status level. So there isn't an imbalance of power. It's like peers from the same class that kind of have the same level of friends, same level of academic success. They just might be fighting over if somebody's out in tetherball, and they're both angry, and they both may need some facilitation. So here's where the teacher or parent could lead a discussion or offer to help support some conflict resolution, ask questions to support each other's perspectives, things like that that help them internalize those conflict resolution skills, but don't necessarily solve it for them. But that's not bullying. If they're fighting over a tetherball, that's conflict, and it's a great opportunity for them to experience some of those conflict resolution skills that we all use as adults. At the bottom is meanness. So this is when people of still the same balance of power, usually, it could be like an older, younger student or different perceptions of social value, for lack of better terms. But meanness is when someone intentionally hurts someone else. So this is like, I walk by and I'm like, dude, ugly shoes. Or, not that I'd ever say that, but, or somebody like lashes out physically, just like slaps somebody else. The difference here is that it's a solo incident. So it's not the same two people in a conflict or in this meanness all the time. It may be the same child being mean, but he or she isn't seeking out the same victim. So that's a big distinction. Another distinction is that it doesn't happen usually between two people of different status. So a couple of things we can do with meanness, especially if we notice that it's a pattern for a particular kid, is there's something called restorative justice, and it's a practice that schools are kind of catching on to. If you Google it, it has really cool, very inspirational research and some videos attached to it. But it leads children, without being preachy, it leads them to explore the repercussions of their choices and then gives them the opportunity to make it right. So it's a way for the person who chose to be mean to resolve the fallout from that decision. If we're noticing that a child is mean a lot, but not necessarily taking on bullying, then that's when we may explore, like, what's going on? Kids aren't generally mean over and over and over. Like, everybody has a bad day now and then, but this may be the child asking for help in their own mostly obnoxious way. So those are the three classroom conflicts that we see that are not bullying. And here's bullying. So there's 4 types of bullying, and before I get into this, I wanted to share what bullying is. So bullying involves students of unequal power. So it's either an age discrepancy, like an older student picking on a younger student. It could be a physical discrepancy where there's a very strong student picking on a very weak student, or a very large student picking on a very small student. It can be a social imbalance of power, which is a little bit more difficult to assess because it's based on perception, but adults have a pretty good read on the popularity of kids if you just observe for a while. So that would be like the very popular child picking on the less popular, maybe new, maybe somebody who doesn't have such clean clothes compared to the child who has really super pristine, you know, perfect hair, that sort of thing. A lot of, like, if you're picturing the give me your lunch money every single day, and it's the kid who's huge compared to the kid who's tiny, and it's repeated over a lasting period of time, so there's that imbalance of power and the repetition, the manifestation over time, that's bullying. So when you compare it to meanness and conflict, both parties are angry. Meanness, it's an ugly moment, but it's not the same pattern over time. Bullying is like, you know what, I've picked you out, I'm going to pick on you on purpose, over time, every day, and I have more power than you. That's bullying. And sometimes that's a subtle difference, but the difference is important a lot because of the way the law is written and how schools address it. The recommendations I'm going to give in a little bit for avoiding bullying also works for avoiding meanness a lot of the time, and maybe even conflict. It's just good people skills and good thinking. So 4 types of bullying: verbal, physical, relational, and cyber. I will go over each of them, and I have to give you a pre-apology. You may feel a little bit like the next section is talking like you're a child, and you're right, because you're not a child, but I wrote this with the idea that you could share this with a child. So it's written directly to the child in directives to empower you with the language to talk to your kids. So bear with me. I know when I do presentations for teachers, I hate treating them like kids, so I apologize to you as well, but I think you'll find some value in it. So verbal bullying, you've probably seen it. You've probably been victim to it before, at least verbal meanness, if not bullying. So there's some ideas of what it is. And you know what, as a disclaimer before we move on too much farther, even though this is about kids and protecting your kids from bullying, adults can bully, teachers can bully, adults can be bullied in the workplace. So some of this may resonate with you, like, oh my gosh, you know, this person was a bully to me. And I hope that some of this is helpful to you as well. But you know, if your child is reporting that they're seeing a teacher be a bully or the teacher's bullying them, it's a valid enough concern to not dismiss it. Teachers are human. I love my teachers, but you know, trust your kid. So if you're targeted with verbal bullying, a lot of what I advocate for is to really pretend to be tough. And this is incredibly hard, and this is coming from someone who grew up looking like the perfect bully target. Like, I was a little bit dorky, a little bit overweight, and I could cry at the drop of a hat. And I didn't feel like I had much control over that, and because of that, I made the perfect target. So, and this is, again, where I kind of warned at the beginning, it's going to feel artificial. We've got to train our kids not to cry, and there's a whole bunch of strategies on, like, thinking of something else, or I'll teach you in a little while how to train your kids to have something to say, like, right away, so that they don't have to think, sort of like that autopilot protective mode. And I'm not saying don't cry therapeutically, I'm saying don't cry in front of the bully. So as this comes up and you're talking with your kid, absolutely cry. It sucks. It's not fair. It's not okay. It's definitely something we need to address. But as hard as they can try to not cry in front of the bully, that's going to reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence. So it's a tricky situation because I feel like we're kind of advocating to ignore their emotions, and we're just kind of postponing their emotions, if that makes any sense. With verbal bullying, it's very helpful to have the child who's experiencing it write it down, exactly what was said. Sometimes that helps to analyze whether or not it really was bullying, kind of maybe it's an interpretive thing because we're sensitive about something. again, there's no blame in that statement because I've been there too. It's just the more data we have to look at it, I think the better your child will be able to be coached by you. So write it down. That will also help in reporting it, and if the school chooses to use some of the restorative justice practices, that will help show the bully what they said and what they did and kind of help them be aware of the repercussions. Especially for girls, this next part, remember you're not crazy. Sometimes you walk away feeling yucky and you're not sure why. A lot of the times verbal bullying can be sneaky. So sometimes you may pick up on the fact that it's bullying just hearing what your child's saying is happening before they even pick up on it. So just listen for those patterns and that sustained experience over time. That's really going to indicate that it's bullying and not just somebody being a turkey one day. And report it. So here's another part where I really advocate strongly to stick with this. So yes, tell a trusted adult. It doesn't have to be the teacher. It could be somebody on campus that your child really connects with. It can be you. It can be an aunt or an uncle. The point that I really want to emphasize here is do not report it in front of the bully. I used to teach in a pretty impoverished, kind of sketchy neighborhood that I absolutely loved. I miss it. It was a wonderful place to make a difference. But that was the first place where I heard snitches get stitches. And definitely not advocating that you say that to your kids, but the point was, and it was kind of a kitschy way to remember it, like if you tell on somebody, you're going to get hurt by the person you're telling on. So just remind your kid, you know, yes, it's not okay. You definitely need to tell, but don't tell in front of the person that you're telling on. And I know that sounds goofy to say, but I cannot emphasize enough how many students I've had to coach on this particular point because they only made the situation worse for themselves when they were trying to make it better. And it was really heartbreaking to see them end up causing more problems than they were prepared for. So information, I'm not going to take much time on the witnessing bullying, but information on if your child witnesses verbal bullying, it's just, you know, don't laugh as hard as you can. Again, that's kind of the postponing the emotion piece, but the more audience we give the bully, the worse it gets. And then report it as well. Physical bullying. This is probably the one that our community worries about the most because children with CMT and adults don't have the best balance, and you know, we're pretty easy to topple over. So I definitely would stress about this as well. Sorry, my throat got all goofy. So don't fight back. I know every year I see on the news, it's a new anti-bully program, and then it's karate or some sort of martial arts. And I'm not dissing martial arts, they're awesome. But as far as addressing bullying, chances are you're going to get in trouble if you use those tactics, and it may just make the situation worse. It may just escalate the problem. So first effort always is to escape physical bullying. If you can't escape, protect your head and take a wide stance with your legs if you can. If not, possibly even sitting down so that you don't fall down would work well too. And I know it just makes me sick to even say that, but this is something that maybe we can just kind of put in our kids' back pockets. Hopefully they'll never need it with the preventative stuff that I'm going to cover, but still food for thought. So we're going to talk a little bit more about standing up for themselves and kind of some go-to phrases to get them, but sometimes bullies really depend on that whole victim personality where we don't speak up for ourselves. So when your child can scream, "Leave me alone," it will get adult attention pretty quick, and it may surprise the bully where he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's not a good target." So something to consider. Physical bullying, witness, I'm going to leave that to you guys because I just noticed the time and I want to save time for questions as well. Relational bullying, oh, that's sneaky, sneaky relational bullying. So this was interesting for me in doing my research on bullying because isolation is one of the sneakiest but most prevalent forms of bullying, especially in the relational category. So that's the whole, oh, we don't talk to so-and-so, or pressuring groups to not include someone, or pulling kids away from other kids so that the target is all alone. There's lots of forms of relational, just that social bullying, and there's good ways to handle it. So again, don't cry in front of the bully. It's okay to feel sad. It really, really stinks, but keep it as bottled up as you can. Yeah, it just stinks. I know that's a tough thing to do, but relational bullying is the most fueled by that emotional reaction. So if you get offended, if you start trying to throw insults back, if you cry, if you grab the teacher right away and tell in front of the bully, all of those things will actually, you know, add fuel to the fire. So we have to be aware of what motivates that type of bullying and what keeps it around. I was victim to this when I kind of had frenemies in 6th grade, and I thought they were friends, and they were definitely bullying with some of the relational tactics. So part of the reflective coaching that you can do with your child is to say, you know, like, does this person make you feel good? And if not, you know, let's see what we can do about finding somebody that does make you feel good, somebody that is supporting you. They're out there. Sometimes the bullies are really enticing and alluring and interesting because they're a little bit edgy, and especially when you're in that 6th to 8th grade group, you know, we're all kind of on a roller coaster. So sometimes that different person is exciting. So really help your child reflect on how the friends make them feel, and then that may lead them to make that determination. But the warning I have here is, don't tell your child, don't be friends with her, she's not a good person, or, you know, any of that preachy stuff, especially in that 6th through 8th grade range. It's going to probably make that person more exciting to your child just because of the way we're wired when we're that age. So asking those questions and kind of letting the answer simmer is highly more effective. It's hard because we want to tell them what to do, but you know, as much as you can to pull out that judgment and just let your child kind of feel their own answer, they'll pick the right way. They really will. It's just, it's hard being patient and watching them suffer through sometimes, but they will. They'll make it. A safe space, I think, is something that I advocate for all of this. If you can avoid the bullying somehow, if you notice a pattern, or if you know that there's a safe place, maybe skip a few recesses. That stinks. But find a spot where you can be safe while the adults address the bullying. So that I'm not advocating that you remove yourself from all social situations at all, but it's okay if your kids want to ask, you know, hey, can I help during recess or things like that, just to give themselves some time to let the adults handle it. So part of bullying is addressing bullying, sorry, is empowering the bystanders. So there are a couple good bully programs in that they address the bystanders. I'm still not a fan of the whole anti-bullying, because I truly believe that someone who chooses to bully is probably asking for help through that behavior. So being anti kind of makes it worse for them. But there's a lot of data showing that if you just have one bystander stand up, a lot of the bully behavior reduces. So and this is important too, because your child, we can't only think of our children with CMT as potential victims. They're part of the social system, and if they're going to be witnesses, to bullying as well. So if we empower them to be this empathetic model, what an amazing gift to give them. You know, they'll be strong and kind. So I'm going to give you some tips in a second of what to teach your kids to do if they see it, and kind of some things to say. Cyberbullying totally was not around when we were young, huh? So this is interesting. I apologize, my goodness. So cyberbullying happens online or through technology. So this can be texting too. My goodness me, oh my. I have seen like text wars go on. It can get pretty intense. Unfortunately, there's some stuff that kids can do with photos to kind of Photoshop them and turn them into things, send them out. There's threats that they can do. There's even hate websites, which blew my mind, but you know, like I Hate Sarah could be a website. Please don't build it, but that could be a website as well. So lots of ways that bullying can happen online, and I think the allure of cyberbullying and why it's kind of becoming a real threat to our children is that it can be done so anonymously that you can kind of be a chicken and still bully somebody. So it's an interesting dichotomy of motivation there, but definitely something schools need to be aware of as well, because even though it generally happens off campus, it very much impacts the academics and the social elements at school. So if you're targeted with cyberbullying, absolutely save the evidence. So I'm going to kind of go rogue and show you real quick how to print screen. So I'm going to escape this. Don't mind, you'll see my computer for a little bit. So on your computer, if you're watching on your computer, search for a button that says PRTSC. It might say PRNTSCR, something along those lines. And what that means is print screen. So you're going to, don't do it right now, I'll do it for you. But if, let's say, you had a Facebook page that had something negative on it that you wanted to save, the owner of that Facebook page could take it down, and then you wouldn't be able to access it. So part of saving some of this technology evidence is easily done with print screen. And you can do this on your phone as well. I'm going to show you on the computer, but it depends on what type of phone you have to do the print screen. So if you just Google how to print screen on Samsung Galaxy 7, haha, just kidding, nobody's using those right now. But that's what I had to do, is look at, is it Galaxy? No, I can't remember. You know, the ones that light on fire? It's very strange to do a webinar, guys. I can't hear or talk to anybody, so bear with my lame jokes. So that's all I did. I just looked up the Samsung, how to take a print screen, and then I figured out how to do it on my phone. So I'm going to do it on the computer real quick. So you hit print screen. That's all you have to do, just that button. And then you open a Word document, and then you can right-click and click paste. And what was on your screen is now in your computer, and you can go up and save it as evidence. So that's just another way to be able to save what you have as evidence. And some of you may have little kids, but that's, whoops, sorry about that, my goodness. It's good to know so that you can address it if it does come up. Let's see. Okay, we're almost there. There we go. A lot of the addressing bullying is kind of getting the same, where you're like, oh, I get it. Here's the part with cyberbullying that's really tempting, and we need to make sure our kids don't do, is like, bullying makes you feel very isolated, and it's tempting to say, oh my gosh, look what Jenny sent me. Ew, isn't she awful? And kind of make the situation worse. Please have your child not send it out, because the person they send it to is now privy to that information, is now part of that big cyber web, and could make the bad decision to send it out to even further. So keeping the information where it is with your child is probably the best bet. If something's inappropriate on Facebook, there's also the option to report it. If your child has a Facebook account, they probably know how to do that. So just another thing to know. And not that I'm advocating spying on your children, but I do know a few parents, wink, wink, who make accounts on Facebook that maybe aren't real accounts and friend their children so that they can kind of keep tabs on them. When I taught junior high, I made a teacher page, and I totally stalked my kids because I wanted to make sure they were okay. So, you know, I mean cyber stalked. I mean nothing bad. Don't report me. So similar advice here. So bullying of any kind. Avoid being a target. Here again, I know we talked a little bit about sort of being aware that our culture values looks and conformity, especially in those like high bully years, and that stinks, and I get it, and some days I wish I could just show up to work in pajamas and no makeup and be treated just as professionally as when I dress professionally, but that's not the world we're in. So since oftentimes DNT is an invisible disability where you have manifestations that are physical and people can kind of pick up on the behavioral side of it, but they can't see what's actually going on with our nerves. And that presents a whole other issue of people assuming that you're faking it or not. But for our children who wear braces on their legs, people might ask them about them. And as much as we want to say, ew, it's rude, don't do that, mind your own business, 9 times out of 10 they're going to ask. And so if we deny our kids the chance to practice a response because we think it's rude to ask, then we're denying them the opportunity to be ready. So my advice and what I've seen be really successful with kids is to have them practice. So you can just ask your child, hey, what are those braces all about, just as a practice at home, and they can kind of come up with something that's natural to them, doesn't sound too adulty, and they can share as little or as much as they want. So they can say, you know, oh, I just wear these for now, you know, something very easy, but point being, if they're very sensitive about whatever the bully picks up on, that's going to make them more of an attractive target. So getting them to have something that's like drawn up right away, straightforward, matter of fact, practice so much that they can say it with very little emotion. It might make them feel a little bit fake, but it will help them address the questions that could lead to bullying. And it'll help them address the questions that could just kind of hurt their heart. So definitely something I would advocate for. If we talked about that part, avoid it if you can as a temporary solution while us adults try to figure out how the child brain works and what we can do. A secret code. My mom is listening. Thank you, Mom. We had a secret code when I was little, so if I went to a friend's house and I was having a bad time, I could say my secret word in a sentence, and it was the name of an animal, so it wasn't, look at that, I'm still protecting it. I'm still not saying my secret word. But I was able to say my secret word in a sentence that, like, didn't draw any attention from anybody that was around me, but my mom was able to say, oh, okay, I need to come get you, or, you know, somehow indicate that I needed some help. So it's a great idea to have a word or a phrase or something that your child can text or say in conversation that will give you an indication that they need help or they need an out without drawing social attention to them. And remember, the time heals. There are definitely better bully-free days ahead, and Facebook has been slightly therapeutic in seeing that everybody sort of evens out when they're in their 30s like we are. Like, that social class system that was sort of artificially in place in 6th grade just dissolves, and we're just people, and that's pretty great. So as much as we can coach our kids to remember that. They won't believe you, but it's good rhetoric for us to kind of get in their brains. Another thing, and I know I struggle with this because you feel kind of fake, but a good way to have our kids learn how to fit in when fitting in is so important is to teach them to spy and kind of analyze what other kids are doing. It may be like what's popular to wear or what's popular to play. If there's a recess game that your child wants to play but they're not sure about their strength or their coordination for it, maybe that's something you can practice at home and make your own accommodations or try some modifications to see if you can make the game work for them. That's very empowering for them because that's definitely a social asset to be able to have that skill set to join in the groups. So I know conformity, like, I'm not advocating for that, but at the same time, I recognize that it's such an important part of adolescence that we can't deny our kids that opportunity to work on some skills to fit in just because we don't like the idea of conformity. So coaching them to look around, kind of notice things, and then you guys can problem solve at home would be a great way to address it as well. So I put in this picture because I'm not a fan of that anti-bully thing. I think it's very isolating. A new way is empathy and invisible skills. So empathy and sympathy are used interchangeably sometimes, but they're not the same. So empathy is that really good friend that kind of holds you while you feel really bad, and they say, man, I've been there. What can I do? You know, just tell me all about it. I'm feeling with you. Sympathy is the friend that calls and says, okay, here's a real life example. I posted on Facebook that I had been having toe pain for about a year post-surgery, like very intense toe pain. You guys know what I'm talking about. And I finally got, my doctor finally did x-rays, and my toe was completely dislocated. It was actually broken. And I posted on Facebook, vindicated, I'm not crazy, I have this pain, and I'm going to schedule surgery, and I'm full of hope, and, you know, like feeling like, hey, my toe's broken, but at least I have a way through. And a lot of people had empathetic responses like, oh, I'm so sorry, I imagine that was really hard. And I had one person say, well, at least you still have your legs. And I thought, huh, it was definitely not, it wasn't empathy, it was sympathy. Like, oh, that's too bad. I feel for you, but, you know, I don't really connect. Like, I'm going to acknowledge your feelings, but I'm not going to go there with you. That's sympathy. Empathy is powerful for our kids because it helps our students learn to take others' perspectives. It's also incidentally great for reading comprehension and a whole slew of other Common Core things, but the great thing about empathy is that it addresses bullying in a lot of very sneaky ways. So instead of drawing more attention to, oh, be a buddy, not a bully, or, you know, kind of pulling bully into the rhetoric of our students and kind of their narrative, instead of that, it's just bully prevention organically, where it happens when we're not around to prompt them. So I'll show you a little bit about how to teach empathy, but the great thing is it empowers bystanders, because if you're watching and you can imagine what it's like to be the victim, you are very much more likely to stand up or at least report it. It can help the victim heal because you can kind of see the perspective of the bully and understand that they're suffering as well sometimes. And I'm not saying that in a blame the victim way at all. But sometimes that can be part of the healing process. I had a second grade student who was being picked on the bus by an older child, and he said, you know, I realize you must have a really bad life if you need to pick on kids like me. And it was really interesting. He used that empathy to address the bully directly, and it stopped completely. So food for thought in how empathy can be very powerful. Maintaining an empathetic class is so great for limiting the bullying opportunities because, and unfortunately I've seen this a lot, but if a teacher has a student that's kind of on the periphery, doesn't fit in that exact classroom mold, whether it be behaviorally or academically, he or she may isolate that student and end up sort of setting the social stage for bullying. But a teacher who can take every child's perspective is going to advocate for every single child, no matter their challenges, and model that ability to empathize when students are in conflict. So how do we develop empathy? It's really, really difficult and incredibly, very profoundly easy. So I know that doesn't make sense, but hold tight. So if your child has had a situation and you're trying to facilitate an empathetic stance, it's really through questioning that we get them to come to healthy, internalized, organic perspectives that they will carry with them rather than us preaching to them. So you take off your teacher hat, you take off your parent hat, you take off your coach hat, and you're a facilitator. So it's really powerful to do with a full group. And at the bottom it says redrover.org. They have a great program on how to have volunteers come in the class and work on developing empathy. And by the way, I meant to say this in the previous slide, but there's what researchers refer to as like an emotional keyboard, and we're really only born with a very few, I don't remember if it's 5 or 6, but very few innate emotions, happy, sad, angry, things like that. But emotional skills like empathy are taught. So this isn't something that's going to develop without that facilitation. So you have a great opportunity to help. So as you're talking with your child, or you're talking with a class, or maybe your family, you just ask questions, well, how do you think this person is feeling? What tells you this person is feeling this way? What do you think the person is thinking? Things like that. And then you restate what the person says without adding or judging, and that is so hard, but so powerful. And when you're doing this with a whole class, you would actually restate or ask the child to further delve into their response if they're right. But otherwise, you just acknowledge that the child said something. So this gives the opportunity to be wrong without being in trouble. So that's a little bit about developing empathy. I don't want to take too much time on this because I have some great tips, but I'd really love to talk with any of you who are interested in doing this in classrooms or want more information about how to do this in even school-wide. It can be one of the most powerful tools to make bullying pretty much impossible, because if you can take someone's perspective, you're not going to make them feel bad, because that makes you feel bad because you can feel what they're feeling. So it kind of just takes the oomph out of any sort of bullying, because it's just, there's no petri dish for that bullying to grow in anymore when you have that empathetic class. So another great way to do bully prevention and just address it, kind of empower our babies, is to teach your kid how to speak up. So teach your kid how to speak up when they see bullying. And it's really interesting, they have studies on what children say they would do versus what they will actually do. Most kids will say, of course I'd speak up for my friend. But when they witness it, they realize that if they draw attention to themselves, the bully may pick on them. So very often kids will actually chicken out of speaking up. So when they are empowered to know what to say, and they've practiced it enough where there's no emotion or fear associated with it, they will be much more likely to speak up. Same goes for disarming a bully. So if your kid has a whole tool belt of things to say when things get ugly, they're going to shut that bully down. There's going to be no audience available, because it's just goofy. The bully's already kind of lost a little bit of face with everybody when your child can speak up. So here's a couple ideas. for preloaded bully responses. So maybe I do limp, but you should see me paint a picture, or whatever that particular skill is. So whatever the bully says to your child, and this could just be a mean moment too. Remember, we talked about the difference, but it doesn't really matter if it's mean or bully. It could hurt your child. So let's prepare them. So whatever the bully says, why do you walk that way, or why do you hold your pencil funny, or any of those physical CMT manifestations? Your child could say, like, yeah, I do that, and so what? You should see me do this. I mean, there's really nowhere for a bully to go with that. Another one is to kind of like make fun of the fact that the bully is doing that in the first place. So really? Can you make fun of me? Lame. Something like that. Something like my second grader did last year. One that kids do to us adults all the time is wow, but I had to put in parentheses how to say it because it's like this. Wow. Sort of has a at the end, and it comes with a face. So that's another one that your child can practice, just to kind of like make the bully look a little bit crazy, make it look really dumb that he's or she is engaging in this. Another thing that I actually got from another one of my second graders, when a student had joined our class and was like, why does so-and-so do that? And before I could even respond or, do the empathy development, one of my kids said, you know what, you do your thing, so-and-so will do his. And it was like, oh, all right, they're getting it. So another thing would just be, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Like, I'm cool with it. Even if in the inside your child is turning into a tiny raisin, which is legit. I mean, things like that hurt, but at least on the outside, he's putting up that bully wall saying, nope, not your victim, no way. And then another one, that's cool, I don't really care what you think. And you don't have to do these verbatim. Don't take my word as gospel. Like, whatever works for your kid, whatever matches their speech pattern. You could even kind of attend to things that they say to you when they're kind of dismissing you and tailor those. Things like that. It doesn't have to be something that I'm putting out there, but there's some good examples, some starter ideas. So a quick way, man, I miss those kids. They're so old now. A quick way to think about practicing those skills, whether it's recess modifications or ways to respond to questions about braces or anything like that, or ways to respond to mean moments, is teach and script. That's where you do a lot of coaching. You could even model it. Role play at home, practice. You can use siblings if you want to, and then try it, and then see how well it goes at school when you transfer it. So I didn't save much time for questions, and I deeply apologize, but it's a pretty beefy topic. If you want to, my website has my email on it, and I will definitely send you a PDF of the Unauthorized Guide to Bullying that has a little bit more content, especially in the areas of what's expected for the different age ranges and what's kind of typical. And then if you're interested, I have a book that features vignettes of a ton of different kids and really is aimed at empathy development. My website even has questions on the book on how to have students kind of step into everybody's shoes in the book and experience what they're going through. It's called Everyone Has Something, which is definitely a truth in our world. So I appreciate your time tonight. I'm very, very thankful for this opportunity to talk with everybody. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Sarah, thank you so much. I mean, that was a really excellent presentation. I've never had anybody who talked almost exactly 1 hour. You must have given this talk before, because it worked out very perfectly.
Oh, so, it's because I wore a watch. I was monitoring myself.
Well, we have no questions, honestly. A lot of people on the list here, though, saying thank you. you went over it in such detail. I can't thank you enough. I think it's perfect. And everyone, this will be posted on the CMPA website in the next week or so. So if you want to listen again or figure out how to get a hold of Sarah, then you can always check back in there too. And with that, Sarah, let's just say goodnight, and then we'll call it an evening.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Keep loving those babies, and I'm around if you need me, so please email.